I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Dr. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai. Born and raised in Vietnam, she is the author of the global best-selling novels The Mountains Sing and Dust Child. She has published 12 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction in Vietnamese and English, and has received some of the top literary prizes in Vietnam. She has a PhD in creative writing from the UK's Lancaster University. She is an advocate for the rights of disadvantaged groups in Vietnam and was named by Forbes Vietnam as one of the 20 most inspiring women of 2021. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kara, for having me on your podcast, and thank you for your contribution to literature.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. It has been a blessing for me and a lovely thing to do to be at home with my kids, but have this creative avenue that I'm working on as well while being with them.
How long have you worked on the podcast? And thank you so much for recommending my book, The Mountain Sing, to readers. Actually, I met someone who kind of talked about your podcast and your recommendation, to me when during one of my recent events in Hanoi, and I was really surprised.
I've been doing this since November of 2022. So it's been about a year and a half now. And I know exactly who you're talking about. She's absolutely lovely. I enjoyed our conversation thoroughly when she came on the show. And I have recommended The Mountains Sing multiple times on this show. It was a lovely book that I read. And so I am just so honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. Has been, it took me 7 years and countless of sleepless nights to write the mountain thing. And it took me also a long time to find an agent and a publisher. And I'm just so thankful to anyone who read the book, who read the book and recommended it. So the book is very much inspired by my family experiences and also the experiences of hundreds of people whom I interview. So it's very much like real life Vietnamese history.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering. And so maybe we should tell the listeners a little bit about it, since if they haven't read it yet. But it's a dual timeline story about a grandmother and a granddaughter. And so I was wondering if there was maybe some family ties as I was reading it. And I myself have not been to Vietnam, but I adore traveling through the pages of books and learning about different cultures and different countries and experiences that I will never have. So I get to walk in someone else's shoes as I'm reading. And I felt like I was able to do that in The Mountains Sing.
Oh, thank you so much. Recently, when I was in Vietnam, I had an event at a bookshop, and two readers came unexpectedly. They came to the bookshop, and they saw my event, and they decided to stay. And they said they had come to Vietnam because of the mountain thing. So they couldn't believe it that they came and they saw my event, and they said they canceled they planned for the whole day, and they stayed. It was so emotional. I felt like I met some true friends.
Yeah.
So thing is a journey into Vietnamese history and culture and family relations via the lives of four generations of a Vietnamese family. So the story is told with the viewpoint of a grandmother and her granddaughter. So because I was born when both of my grandmothers had died, I was
Okay.
with of my friends who had grandmothers to tell them stories. So as a child, I promised to myself one day I would try to write a novel with a grandmother in it, so I would have a grandma. And I feel really bad, right, when many readers have written to me and said, "Oh, I love your grandmother," and I had to tell them, "I'm sorry, she's fictional because I never met my grandmothers. My family don't even have a picture of both of my grandmas. I don't even know what they look."
Wow.
but through fiction, I could imagine them and their dreams and their hopes. And I feel they're very much alive, with this novel and with the reception of the book. So, it's like you said, it's a great way of traveling to a country through books, right?
Yeah.
And readers have told me that it will really enrich their experience in traveling through Vietnam while reading the mountain thing. So readers have sent me pictures of them reading the book on the train
Wow.
or at the beach or everywhere in Vietnam. So it has been incredible to see my book hold with amazing readers.
Yeah. My husband is in the military, and so we move often. And so I really use books to help me learn about the local place we are living. And one day I have dreams we'll be traveling again for leisure. And so I always loved trying to read books of where we were going.
Oh, well, I also have a moving life because of my husband's job. He works in, development corporation to help with poverty alleviation. So we work in, poor developing countries. So we have been, living and working in Bangladesh, the Philippines, Indonesia, and now Pakistan. So I decided to stay in Vietnam and Pakistan because of his job. So
Yeah.
I have always said that this writing life saved our marriage.
Yeah.
I had a crisis when I had to move with my husband because I was ripped away from Vietnam, from my job. I had a great career. And then I was thinking, what could I do? And
Yeah.
then you're a great writer. Why don't you write full time? And at a time, I had published books in Vietnamese and,
Okay.
translator. And because, yeah, so I agreed and I went back to school. I did my master and did my PhD. And I studied into different, like, for example, I read about how to decolonize, literature. So that gave me a lot of courage, to 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 write, the Vietnamese, for example, to kind of put Vietnamese text in the original Vietnamese format rather rather than, instead of taking away the tonal marks of our language.
I've always wondered as a writer how much your creative process, right? But then I know from the publishing side, they're trying to publish and sell books, right? And I've always wondered how much you get to maintain your, creative and what you want, and then match that up with the publisher's journey of your novel as well. Can you speak to that a bit?
I'm really lucky that my publisher, Algonquin Books, uh, the team at Algonquin Books is just really, really supportive. So, for example, um, with my studies, I could look into the way that writers for minority cultures have decolonized, literature about their countries. So, for example, and that gave me the courage to
Mhm.
publisher to keep the Vietnamese tonal. So, for example, normally, when Vietnamese authors are published internationally, we are required to abbreviate our name
Okay.
and use it in the English way. For example, like put our first name first and last name second, right? And
Yes.
is that to use the Vietnamese, like authentic Vietnamese way. For example, my name Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai, the traditional Vietnamese way by putting my surname first and first name. So, for example, and normally we would be required to take away the little marks on top, but these marks are really important. They kind of define the meaning. They are as important as roof of our home. So, for example, the second word of my name, Quế. Can you say Quế?
Gui.
Cinnamon.
Okay.
Parents named me cinnamon to an ingredient of the Vietnamese traditional medicine, so I would always stay healthy. So if you take away the mark, my name would become QUE, and you would pronounce it Que. Can you say Que?
Gui.
Que means stick, a stick.
Oh,
So
so different.
cinnamon, from being cinnamon, I would be reduced to a stick. So I wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
Please, show respect to the Vietnamese culture by printing my name the traditional Vietnamese way. And in my book, I also have all of the characters. You know, I have a family tree, and all the family members. The names are spelled in this way, and this is so important. Like my audiobook narrator Queen Ngô did a beautiful video, and I will send it to you, where she kind of she explains the meanings of the name.
Okay.
So all the Vietnamese names, normally our names have meaning embedded into them.
Yeah.
So I also use this in my second novel, Dust Child, in which I kind of highlight the importance of the tonal marks. So, for example, in my book, an American veteran then, be friends with some Vietnamese people, and he keep calling them, like he keep changing their names to make it easy for him to pronounce. And then later on, when he uh, takes Vietnamese lessons, he then writes to his Vietnamese friend, "I'm sorry, Thai. My Vietnamese teacher has told me that your name means talented, but I have been calling you Thai, which means an ear."
Oh, yeah.
This book, through the book, the readers will learn the importance of the Vietnamese, tone and the complexity and the color of our language. And because normally the international reader reads a lot of literature that represents Vietnam as the war,
Yeah.
and also like a lot of Hollywood movies about Vietnam. We are seen as the war, and Americans are there to save us. And
Hmm.
so present Vietnam as a country with more than 4,000 years of history and culture in both of my books. So there's a lot of delicious food. Some
Yeah.
readers may get really hungry when they read my novel. I hope they do, because I got hungry when I wrote them.
I did when I was reading The Dust Child over the past few weeks and I did.
I put in a lot of my favorite food, the food that I love best. For example, I wrote this about Vietnamese bánh mì. Do you
Yes,
remember?
and that's what I was savoring because I had a amazing Vietnamese shop I would stop by back when we lived in Hawaii, and I've never found anything as good since. And I have not been to Vietnam, but in my mind, I'm like I associate food with time and place and places we've been, and it brought me back to that shop that I would stop in Honolulu all the time because it was so close to our house.
Like the Vietnamese bánh mì or the Vietnamese sandwich is really like easy to make and available everywhere in Vietnam. And my one of my characters in that child, Mr. Thien, said that to his American friends when France invaded Vietnam. They
Yeah.
brought bread. We took the bread and made it better. Like in a way, it's like Mr. Tien was making fun of the colonizers, because Vietnam was colonized by France for nearly a decade, for many decades. We
Yeah.
we make our sandwiches with French bread, and our sandwiches, are really wonderful, because we add coriander, chili, um, also pate and roast pork and a lot of delicious
Yeah.
things.
The fresh flavors with the coriander and the pickled vegetables. Oh, it's not like nothing I've ever had before. I think you've brought up some really beautiful points that I want to go back to about the naming of people in Vietnam. And I mean, I can't speak for all of Americans, but at least I can speak to my family. We don't really think about the meaning of names. We didn't think about the meaning of the names when we named our children. except my oldest we did name after my husband's grandfather. But other than that, it was just came down to did we like the sound of that name? And then as you have more kids, did that name match the other kids in in our family? And um, I never have really thought about the meanings of their names. And I think that is something so beautiful that you have in your culture.
Yeah, and I mean, normally siblings have meanings that when you put them together, they mean something even
Yeah.
more. So in the mountain thing, I have this story that Grandma Lan found her old teacher because she had remembered a story about his name. So the teacher's name is Thịnh and his brother is Vượng. Thịnh Vượng when put together means prosperity. So that's
Okay.
remember the name of the two brothers, and then she could ask them about them and found them their house when she walked, 300 kilometers to reach the capital of Hanoi. So, yeah, so it's our tradition to think about names, when we think about the meaning of names. So a lot of Vietnamese names are resemble different types of fruit and flowers because we love nature. So,
Yeah.
all types of flowers are named for the kids. And also for boys normally it's about courage, strength, resilience, prosperity, or talent.
Does it put pressure on you to know what your name means and maybe you're not quote unquote living up to this name? Is there a pressure that comes from that?
Yeah, definitely. There's pressure to come with a name, but I think when it comes to naming traditions, like when the kids are very little, for families who are superstitious, they name the kids really ugly names. So, for example, in the mountain thing, the grandma, calls her granddaughter guava. Guava is not in the West. It may be an exotic fruit, but
Yeah.
in Vietnam, very plentiful. It's really cheap. It grows everywhere. So by calling this girl guava, the grandma was hoping the evil spirit would not pay attention to the
Yeah.
child to the child. And in one of the books that I am going to recommend today on your podcast is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And the character in this book is called Little Dog by his mom, so that the evil spirit would not notice him. And he has a beautiful name otherwise, but she calls him Little Dog.
Yeah.
Little Dog.
Wow. And then the other thing I was thinking about was how, like you said, uh, a small-mindedness, right? We could think of Vietnam as just the Vietnam War because that's what we've seen through our culture, right? What has been brought to us. And I think that is another thing that reading so beautifully does for us is it expands our world and it broadens our horizons and it allows us to have empathy for others and all of that brings the more we learn, the more we can understand and the more we can broaden our story of Vietnam from just the war to something so much bigger and beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like I write these novels to call for peace and for humans to love humans more
Yeah.
because I feel like the weapons for war is dehumanization. I remember I was talking to a veteran who used to fight in Vietnam, and he told me when he went to Vietnam as a soldier in the 60s, he was really worried about killing the Vietnamese. And his supervisor who sat next to him was saying, "Don't worry about killing the Vietnamese. They have been at war with other nations for hundreds of years. They're not life is cheap for them. They
Yeah.
used being killed and killing others. And in my book Dust Child, I have General Westmoreland, the commander of the U.S. troops in Vietnam. And this is real. You can look where General Westmoreland said, "Life is plentiful, life is cheap in the Orient." So this is so so wrong, with
Yeah.
this terrible discrimination against Asians, and I fight against that kind of, um, of attitude. So I want to humanize everyone, especially those who have been human.
Yeah.
So second novel, that's right. I have three characters: a mixed race, a black person who is subject to extreme discrimination and who was abandoned at birth by his mother, and who now has to search for his parents to know where he comes from and know his parents. And I have two Vietnamese sisters who had to work in bars to serve American soldiers, and they were very much looked down upon by the society. And I also have, traumatized American veteran who returns to Vietnam trying to find healing and forgiveness because he did some terrible things. He abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and walked away from her when she was pregnant. So now he, like more than, I think, 46 years, then he returns to Vietnam and then he realizes that he needs to look for her to be able to meet his responsibility as a father.
It's another beautiful book that I feel like I learned so much about. And culture, I didn't even know Amerasian. I didn't know what that was. I mean, and this is again why I read is to learn about the world. And like you said, it's learning about the other cultures, right, humanizes them. And I think even in for my like just small world of just I think if we could have a conversation with one another and we could get to know one another and we can hear one another's stories, that is what will heal our broken world, I think sometimes is having these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, in the mountain scene, there's this, the granddaughter Hương. She had resented American, right? Because American airplanes were bombing her city, and then she started to read Little House in the Big Woods, and she fell in love with with the American characters, and then she realized that Americans just like Vietnamese. Americans also love to cook, to dance, to sing, and then she was thinking to herself, if everyone is willing to read each other and see into if everyone is willing to read each other and see into the light of other culture, there would be no war on earth. I mean,
Yeah.
if the politicians who decides on war read books about the people whom they are going to wage a war on, I think they would change them. I think if they get to know them intimately,
Yeah.
you know, in their full human capacity, they would appreciate them, sympathize with them more, and find peaceful solutions, find peaceful resolutions. I think, I want to say that when I was 6 years old, I was standing on my village road. I was looking at the devastation around, at the bomb craters, at the people who had lost their family members or their aunts and uncles. I was telling myself as a little girl, the human race would not be so stupid as to wage another war. Just look at this. Just
Yeah.
look. We need to learn from this. And as a child, I really believed in it. And now I know that I'm too naive. That there is too much uh, power and money involved in each war, and it's so devastating. And I think we are powerless, against so many different wars that are happening right now. We are
Yeah.
powerless against, many genocides which are happening right now around the world. And I fear that the human race would one day make ourselves extinct by the acts that we do to ourselves,
Yeah.
to to, our Mother Earth. I really think that each of us, we are here as the child of Mother Earth. I
Hmm.
think we have the responsibility to love and respect each other and find a way to live in peace with each other. And I still don't understand why it is so easy for people to use violence onto each other. It's devastating to me.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that I think it becomes this power, right, that is been so inflated, and then you have the other people on the other end that they're diminishing the value of another human to them just to get them to do the acts they want them to do from their position of power, and it becomes a horrible cycle. And unfortunately, we can continue to look at history and just see it's repetitive. We haven't learned yet.
Hmm. I mean, you mentioned the cycle. And for me, it's this cycle of revenge, of violence is very detrimental to the human race. And that's why in my books I really highlight, like the value of forgiveness. And
Hmm.
Another thing Grandma Zitlan told her daughter, if you bear grudges, you are the one who has to bear the burden of sorrow. I think the greatest gift we could give ourselves is forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because as humans, we make mistakes. We need to forgive ourselves and forgive others. And like I started to write the mountain scene with an intention that I would take revenge on the man who had killed my own grandmother. So my father told me that in the Great Hunger of 1945, where 2 million Vietnamese died under the French occupation of Vietnam, uh, he and his sister were really hungry. So his mom ventured into cornfield, tried to steal corn to bring home for her starving children, and the guard that cornfield, a Vietnamese man, caught her and tied her to the corn plant. Normally, she would be able to break away, but she was also starving, so she was
Yeah.
break away. So she died there in that cornfield. So
Oh.
always had, I held such deep anger towards the man who had done that to my grandmother. So I invented a character in this novel called Wicked Ghost. So I wanted to do terrible things to wicked girls. And with fiction, you can do that, right?
Yeah.
We have a term in Vietnamese called Chu Di Tam Tộc, kill three generations of a family. And I was thinking, but then, I found out that when I write, I found out my values, my mission, my belief, and I found out that I'm not a violent person. I can't stand violence, less violence. So in the book, I found forgiveness instead of revenge. The more research I did, the more I could talk to my parents about their trauma, what they have been through, what our family members have gone through. And in a way, I think it was good to talk and like to communalize our trauma.
Yeah.
So less alone. So, my parents could talk to me, and then, I think we bonded, throughout my research for this novel.
Yeah.
And learned a lot about myself, about my family when researching for this book.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that because normally I'll ask writers on the show, what have you learned about yourself through writing? And it sounds like it's been, they talk about that catharsis of what you get through writing. And it sounds even for how that it was a ripple effect to your family too. It wasn't just for you, it was also to your parents. And that's, wow, what writing can do.
Yeah, and I mean the book, The Mountain Thing. I mean, every day I receive messages from readers, and there are two readers who told me they reconnected with their Vietnamese parents after reading the book
Wow.
because um, Vietnamese people have gone through so much to our turbulent history. We were like colonized, occupied by the French, the Japanese, you know, and before that, the Chinese, the Mongolians, and America wanted to also to conquer us.
Yeah.
So also we had this like war between North and South Vietnam, and Vietnamese did horrible things to each other. So a lot of parents had to make, really difficult, painful decisions. And that happened to two of my readers. And they said the mountain thing helped them understand, sympathize with their
Yeah.
parents. So they decided to reconnect with their parents. And that's the greatest gift that I have received.
I have the chills on how, again, that ripple effect and how just this novel can do that for someone else. And that's the power of reading right there.
So with my novel, that's child, and like you mentioned the term Amerasians. They are the mixed race children who were born out of the Vietnam War, out of relationships between American soldiers and Vietnamese women. And before I did research for this novel, I didn't know that there were nearly 100,000 of them who were
Wow.
many of them were abandoned and lived the life of Buddha or the dust of life. Like the children who they had no home, or they had to live on the street. And I, since the publication of the book, I have been in contact with so many adoptees, with so many Amerasians who reach out to me and share with me their personal stories. And one Amerasian, his name is Kirk, and he's a filmmaker. And he told me that, the book helped him understand the actions of his mom, who gave him away and whom he found after more than 40 years.
Yeah.
So it was just unbelievable. And then when he read the book, he saw himself in the story, and that's the magic of fiction. It can be, in a way, the fiction, like fiction is something that writers make up, you know
Hmm.
because we build it on so much research and so much historical facts that in some way it resembles, the real life experiences of many people. So I have discovered that with both of my novels has been just so amazing. I think it feels like, I'm a part of this feeling, the circle of empathy, and we need to make this circle, stronger every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a beautiful contribution to us and to literature and, like you said, to the world of just pushing out that empathy even farther. I'd love to learn about what reading means to you. What type of genres do you normally read?
So reading saved my life. I was born into the Vietnam War, and I grew up, after the war, under the American trade embargo when Vietnam was isolated from the rest of the world. And like we were starving at that time, and there was so little for us to eat or to hope for. But what gave me hope was the books that I could read. The most precious possession in our home was a bookshelf that my father had built from bamboo from our garden. And my parents filled it with secondhand books that they bought with their savings. We didn't have access to the library nor to a bookshop. Bookshops at that time was run by the government, so it was called the People's Bookshop, and they sold mainly textbooks or books that were produced by the government. So like
Okay. Like a propaganda almost.
propaganda
Yeah.
material. So for real literature, there were a lot of books that were that were banned, that were next, that had been published in South Vietnam before the war, and they were banned. So luckily, we had some copies of those books, and I also borrowed. Any adult came to my house and talked to my parents, I immediately asked them, "Do you have books I could borrow?" I love reading. That's how like because I couldn't travel anywhere. I
Yeah.
couldn't. So Vietnam, at that time to leave Vietnam, you needed an exit visa. Okay, you need an
Wow.
exit visa to go out of Vietnam, and of course you need an entry visa to a country. And at that time, like almost no country wanted to accept Vietnamese, and many
Yeah.
Vietnamese tried to flee Vietnam by boat. So there was a movement of boat people at that time. So, books allowed me to travel, gave me hope, made friends with people around the world. So I dreamt about being a writer at that time.
And I think a lot of us do, right? I think at that age, when you're young and you think, what could I be? And you have so many different ideas, and there's not pressures, societal pressures, familial pressures. There's not pressures on you of what you maybe quote unquote should do. I think about my 3-year-old right now. He currently wants to be a lion tamer. And like in my mind, I'm like, the reality of you being a lion tamer is like real slim. But if you want, but right now he's 3 and we just embrace it. You want to be a lion tamer, buddy? You can be whatever you want.
When people can dream, I think having a dream is a wonderful thing. It kind of it fosters your imagination, right? So working with lions, being friends with lions or building relationship with lions. Wow, what a wonderful dream! And I dreamt of being a writer at that time, but my family didn't want me to be a writer. And my two brothers told me we don't have enough to eat, so study and have a proper job to help parents. I went
Yeah.
on business, and I didn't return to my writing dream until I was like 33 years old.
Yeah. When you finally embraced that dream of a writer, did it feel like, I'm just imagining in your soul, like the authenticity of like, I'm finally living what I felt like I was meant to do as a child.
So I felt finally I felt hope,
Yeah.
because it is like today, if there are days that I haven't written something creatively, I felt like I haven't lived that day. So it means like to write something creatively, it makes me so happy. And also to read a good book also makes me feel so happy. I was thinking the other day, like I am rich, even when I don't have money, but I'm rich because I have all these books around me, and I think reading gives you such pleasure, such wealth, and I, like in when I was in Bangladesh, I work in a library, and this, like my email signature at that time was a Bangladeshi saying. The
Okay.
man who the saying goes, the man who doesn't read doesn't have an advantage over the man who can't read. So being literate and not reading is the same with being illiterate.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's one of the sayings. It's so true, and I think it's sad that nowadays, I mean, in a way, I was very lucky to grow up at that time when there was no TV, no
Yeah.
electricity.
Yeah. No, nothing pulling you away.
My family, my whole street, there was only one family with electricity, with a TV, a black and white, and we had electricity maybe once a week, you know. So there was no distraction. I read under the oil lamp. I read in my garden. Yeah, so there was a lot of time, to learn via reading.
Yeah. I think of that for my kids too, right? Of like you said, we're living in this age of distraction. But my oldest, like he's reading now on his own, and he'll curl up with a book light at night every night. And at this point, I used to kind of be strict on the bedtime, but I'm like, if you're in bed reading and you want to stay up an extra 20 minutes, to me, that's like the ultimate, you're feeling like you're getting away with something as a kid. He's 8. So, um, but I love it. I love that he wants to curl up with a book, and seeing that he also wants to be a reader. And he's asked me, he's like, Mommy, will your podcast be around forever? Because I want my kids to love reading as much as we do. And I was like, of course, got all emotional about that. I'm like, oh, it's just so sweet that you understand the value of reading and and it's enriching his life. He loves it too. It's not forced.
That's so nice. Both of my kids also love reading. And there is nothing that makes me happier than seeing them read and talking about the same book with them,
Yeah.
and often that I read a great book and they recommend it to me, and then I start reading it and we talk about it. Or I also, buy books for them, the books that I love reading. So it's been wonderful. I mean, I think when you talk about books, it's kind of the best type of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a guest come on and say that books are a really interesting currency. And it has never left my mind since she said that because it is such a beautiful conversation piece. No matter, it could be an awkward situation, you could be an introvert, but you can pull that book into that conversation and it can just blossom into something so much more.
And I think, books can open the pathway to intimate conversations because you start talking about something, like so not your own experience, but then, as you discuss about the books, something personal will really come out. So I think people connect with each other in intimately. So that's why I love book club. So
Yeah. Well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight of books for us today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you chose them or how they go together?
oh yeah, so I want to recommend literature about Vietnam, written by historic Vietnamese people. So I
Wonderful.
four titles. I believe in gender balance, so I chose two men and two women. So
Wonderful.
the first one is The Sympathizer by Việt Thanh Nguyen.
Okay.
This is about a Vietnamese spy, and it's a lot of fun, but also serious book. Um, so it won the Pulitzer Prize. And the exciting thing is it's being adapted into a 7 episode HBO series. So the series will be launched at the beginning of April, not so far away. So you better get ready.
Yeah. Get to the sympathizer first before the show comes out. I always think I have to read it. I'm very much a dogmatic about that. I'm going to read it before I'm going to watch it.
Book is on Earth Briefly Gorgeous by a poet, Ocean Vuong.
Okay.
Um, Ocean is a poet, and his poetry comes through in this novel. It's like this book is so poetic. It's in the form of a letter from from a gay person to his mom who is illiterate, so she can't read. So that's why he can confess a lot of secrets to her. So it's beautifully written, highly recommended. And Ocean World, I mean, his prose is something. He's like so talented. He won so many awards with this book already.
There's so much to be said about the language within a novel too, right? And it's transporting you on the page. And so this has been on my to be like my TBR list for quite some time. So I'm gonna have to pick it up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, this book is just so beautiful. And all of the books that I recommend today have beautiful language.
Okay.
They are the pathways into Vietnamese history and culture and ways of life. So this one is a graphic novel, graphic memoir. Um,
Okay.
Memoir, The Best We Could Do by T. Boy. So T look at the
Oh, wow. That is beautiful.
do this for me, and she signed for me, and she wrote a beautiful thing. So she's
Wow.
So you see, so the illustrations are done by herself. So it's about the author's family, what they had to do to survive through the history. So it also won many awards, and it's taught widely in at schools in the US. It's been
Okay.
up to many like common reads program, university reads, really popular book. And it's really like a lot of fun, I mean, the illustrations are just so beautiful. And the stories are just, the story is really amazing. Heartbreaking, hopeful, healing.
Okay.
The fourth book has my blood on the cover. Uh, Banyan Moon by Thảo Thái, and I wrote this on the cover, heart shatteringly beautiful. So it's so the book so my full love, heart shatteringly beautiful by Banyan Moon is a love letter to keepers of secrets, to motherhood, family, and survival. Thảo Thái is a major talent whose exciting, impressive, and poetic prose will grow into you like a strong and lush banyan tree deeply rooted in the rich Vietnamese literary heritage. The book is beautiful. Beautifully designed, and it was a read with Jenna.
Okay.
Can recommend many, many more Vietnamese authors, Vietnamese American, Vietnamese Australian authors. On my bio on Instagram, there is this thing, the link to Read Vietnam post, and
Okay.
where authors are profiled. So I can recommend many, many more. For example, a Legends, a memoir.
Well, and listeners, I'll have links to we can put your website and we can put your Instagram. So, well, how I love to end our show is with a speed round of questions called our bonus pairing. So you can just answer these really quick. Are you a rereader?
Yes, definitely. Like
Okay.
for I've reread on Earth We Brought Briefly Gorgeous many times. I've reread The Sympathizers many times. I feel like each writer spends years drafting a book, right?
Yeah.
And normally it takes a few days to, like if we spend time reading a book for a week or 2 weeks. Whereas, I think each time I reread one of my favorite books, I learn new things.
Yeah.
So
And I think you see it differently. You know the ending, so then you can kind of see along the way little nuggets they've given you that leads toward the ending. And I agree.
then you can like savor the language. I think, like the language, like when you enjoy the language, it's like having a good meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get a lot of satisfaction when I read beautiful prose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am, yeah, definitely read it.
Okay. And then what is a book you've read that has changed your life?
Oh, I think Vietnamese fairy tales. When I
Okay.
was growing up, there was a book of Vietnamese fairy tales on the bookshelf, and I read it cover to cover, and then I reread it. And like these fairy tales were just they were they were magical. They were filled with imagination. They helped me break free, and dreamed of being a writer and
Yeah.
do things like the people in the fairy tale.
Yeah. Opened up your world to what stories could be. That's beautiful. And then what or where is your favorite place to read?
My favorite place to read is I have you know I can read anywhere. I love to read on the plane when I travel. Recently, because on the plane you can't do much, right?
Yeah. You're stuck.
So normally I write or I read. So I just finished reading a book on the plane, and this book was written by a Vietnamese woman who is 93 years old, and who becomes an author the very first time. And her life is like much more than fiction. I just can't believe. And I talked to her after finishing the book, and she's just incredible. And the book is being translated into English, so I will post it on my Instagram. When
Oh, yes, please do. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
I am reading a novel, a beautiful novel, because like I get a lot of requests for blurbs
Yeah.
or for by different publishers. So the book I am reading right now, and I need to finish by 4th of April. That's the deadline. It's called They Dream in Gold by Mai Senna. By Mai
Okay.
Senna. So yeah, They Dream in Gold. So it's I mean, it's beautifully written. It's about two women who have to deal with, two women, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. They have to deal with the disappearance of their husband and son. Yeah? So they have this man who is their son and their husband, respectively, and the man disappeared, and they have to deal with that. And kind of, yeah. So it's so beautifully written.
Yeah, I love the title. It draws you in. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much, Tara, for doing this show and for your contribution to literature. You are amazing. It's like talking with a good friend.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai and her book flight of books by Vietnamese authors. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.